this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. My guest and I are going to talk about a few different things today, but a couple of the highlights so that you all know what you're in for are the invincibility that a lot of us feel that we need to portray, but that a lot of times life will throw curveballs at us and we have to reevaluate what our true capacity is. So we're also going to touch upon self-care and summits and podcasting, but those are the main highlights. So I want to welcome my guest today, Tanya Berfield, to the show.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me. Also, that was a lot. We're gonna, no pressure.
We're going to unpack quite a bit. So I'm so excited that we're actually doing a podcast swap today. So we're starting with my show. We're going to end with your show. And I am thrilled. I don't know that there are necessarily consistently across the board people that could light me up enough to be able to do a back-to-back episode.
No.
So let's share with everybody how we connected and why we were both looking so forward to today. So you were looking for speakers for a virtual summit that you were putting together. I was very intrigued. We had recorded an interview with one another, and it was just very natural, authentic. I feel like it flowed and was really happy to be a part of it. And so connected with you, continued to follow along, learned about your decision to start your own podcast. And so that immediately led me to reach out and see if we could both do this podcast swap. So I'd love for you to share with the audience some of your background, what it is that you do primarily, and some of these newer pursuits that you have going on lately.
I would love to. So I'm a lot of things, I think, which just comes back to that invincibility conversation that we're going to have. So I'm a mom of 3. I've been married for a very long time. I have spent a long time just trying to figure out how to make myself happy, and in pursuit of that and trying to figure out how do I create my own value and my own worth, decided that I should probably get more education. I think when I got married, I had an associate degree. And then I decided I needed a bachelor's degree. And then I very quickly decided I needed a master's degree. And then I very quickly decided that I needed a doctorate degree. I'm not certain why that was ever a thing, because I was not I think it was to prove a point. I can do this. Watch me. I know I can do this, again, with the cape and the invincibility. But also along the way, I've collected this ridiculous amount of certifications in every modality you can possibly even think of. I could line wallpaper walls. It's really a lot. So I bet I have no less than 30 certifications in things like Qigong and yoga and Pilates and hypnosis and meditation and you name it, that it's there. But I did this all because I was trying to figure out what is wrong with me. Why am I not happy when I have all the things that society has told me that are the reasons that would make me happy. These kids make me happy. The dogs make me happy. The house makes me happy. My relationship makes me happy. But there's still something else there. And so there's always just been this drive to do more, but then the guilt that's associated with that when you are a professional woman trying to navigate your way in the world. And so I just have always had this drive to be more and do more. And so I've got this full-time gig, my full-time, no pressure job. I say very sarcastically because it is a high pressure job is I am the director of student advocacy and the Title IX coordinator at a college. And so I think that most of your listeners will 100% very quickly get what does student advocacy mean. These are the things that are stopping students from being successful in academics, but are not related to academics. We're talking about homelessness and food insecurities and domestic violence and, like just situations that are really, really high emotions and hard to navigate. And so how do we help them with that? So that's one side of what I do. And then the other side is Title IX. And so in education, Title IX also comes with Title VI, Title VII, 504. And so these are all things harassment, discrimination, and sexual misconduct. And that turns out to be not an easy thing to navigate. And especially in the climate that our culture is currently in, given this run up to the election, means that racism is a problem. It means that sexual misconduct is a problem. The way that we are treating each other and hating on each other is a problem. And so this seemingly normal job is very high pressure and very heavy, right? So that's, I think, what leads me to this level of incivility and incivility, that is not the right word, invincibility and capacity. Civility is something that's different, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about that too. So along with this job that I have, I have this calling, and I've known that I've had this calling for a really long time, that I am supposed to be helping people navigate things and issues. A lot of times it's, I just don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. The same thing that I was struggling with. I've got these feelings of depression, of anxiety, of stress that I don't know how to calm, and I don't know how to move forward. And so I've started this business of, I hate calling myself a coach, but there's nothing else. I'm a coach. And so I call it empowerment and transformation, because that is my magic. That is what I do, is help people navigate these situations, find clarity, find purpose, find happiness, find joy, so that you can live the life that you were hoping to live. And so I'm trying to do both of those things at the same time. And so I think that, how do we do that in a way that makes sense as an entrepreneur? When you are just being an entrepreneur is really hard. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This is not necessarily what you learn when you're going to school for whatever it is that we were going to school for. So you're trying to navigate all of that. And if you're like me, trying to do that at the same time that you have a full-time job, stressful or not, it's really challenging. And so we set ourselves up for not success sometimes when we have these expectations that that's no problem. I can manage all of these things all of the time. And it doesn't always work that way. So that was a very long-winded answer for you.
Well, that's a very full plate, and I'm sure a challenging balancing act. So all of those things deserved their own spot in your introduction. One of the things that it's bringing up for me before we get into the topic, but I think in all reality, it's related. I completely understand now why I connected with you, because there are so many commonalities in terms of how we conduct ourselves. So you started to talk about this pursuit of happiness, and you were talking about how you always feel this drive to be more and to do more. I could not resonate with that more. And I've actually been doing a lot of my own work to figure out why that is, where that comes from. And one of the things I've been contemplating a lot lately, and I would love to hear your perspective on this, is the difference between meaning and fulfillment. So if I were to reflect back on my life, and even where I am currently, there is so much meaning in terms of the relationships that I've formed, even the conversations that I have. I mean, through podcasting, these are very intentional conversations. There's a level of depth, even when I'm meeting somebody for the first time in that encounter, or in the therapy that I've done, or in the interviews that I've conducted. I'm expected to really get to the heart of the matter quickly, make people feel comfortable and safe. And so meaning, right, is very high for me in terms of the work I do and the people that I serve and who I interact with. I think fulfillment is obviously very, very different. And I'm realizing that that's ultimately what I'm seeking. Happiness is so transient, and it changes depending on the moment sometimes.
Yep.
Where for me, it comes down to more of that fulfillment. What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. So that brings up so many more things for me as well, because I think that, right, like we have to set expectations is one of my favorite conversations, because how do you get to meaning? How do you get to purpose? How do you get to fulfillment without understanding what are the expectations? And how did you get to those expectations? Did you set them, or did somebody set them for you? Was it something that was just, I was expected to go to college, I was expected to do this job, I was expected to run the family business, I was expected to do these things, whether they meant it or not. And it, like, that just in itself brought up so many like thoughts in terms of limiting beliefs and what my own, and I'm going to say this, my parents, I hope they never listen, because they meant well, they did the best they could, and I had a great childhood, like I'm not saying that, and I don't have huge traumas to associate with that, but also they had limiting beliefs. They didn't believe I could go to college. They didn't think that I was smart enough to do that, which is why I now have a doctorate degree. And like, so much, all of the time and effort that I put into that, just to like show them I can do that. And then I think
Proving yourself
too,
to some extent.
what was, say that again?
Proving yourself to some
Yeah,
extent.
it's all down to that value and that worth. But I think that, like, back to what you're saying in terms of meaning, I I also have done a lot of work in this area, and for a little while I was like, am I a narcissist? Like, do I not feel love? Do I not feel these things? Because people tend to like recognize me, or want to talk to me, or want me to be the person that like, just process this with me, because they feel that connection. And then I'll be like, I don't feel that connection. Like,
Mhm.
what's happening there? Do you like me? Like, it's often like, for a while I'd be like, wait, you think something of me? Like, you care about my opinion on this? Because I
Mhm.
don't think that I'm smart enough to do that with you. And so it took me a long time to get past that, to recognize that I have the value that to bring to the conversation. And that connection is really about the energy, because I do the hippie woo energy kinds of work too. And so I think that it's really about that exchange. And, like you said, like, we connected very quickly. And I think that probably comes back to, there's a bigger meaning, I'm trying to think of a different word, depth to these connections. And so
Yes.
when you recognize that, whether it's tangible and it's in your face, or whether it's an
Mhm.
energetic connection, the whole vibe and tribe kind of thing,
Mhm.
there's something more to it. And so when you get that and you get to feel that connection, then that does bring meaning to the conversation and the relationship and the development of
Mhm.
that, which then brings you to that place of fulfillment. And I talk about happiness and I talk about joy, but you're not kidding. They're not tangible. So you can't, and you might have it today, but it might be gone in half an hour. So you have to continually work for it. You're never going to just own that. It's a thing that's going to come and it's going to go. But
Mhm.
how are you feeling fulfilled? And I think that then comes back to the meaning, the expectation, the purpose. So there's
Mhm.
so much there.
That was a really great synopsis, and I feel like
Okay,
you brought it full circle.
good,
So when
because
you
I feel like I was just like, woo, here it is.
that struck a chord, and I figured it might. And so when I think of invincibility, I think a lot of us being natural helpers and empathetic, and how a lot of times we can take on a lot more than is reasonable for us. And we don't necessarily always recognize that we're doing that sometimes until
Mhm.
maybe it's too late and we might be in that burnout phase. So then when I think of capacity, I feel like that's something that changes over time depending on where we're at physically and where we're at mentally and our energy levels. So if you could explain for everyone what you see the connection between the two as, and how would
Mm.
you define
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that they're so closely aligned, right? So I think that for me, capacity is just about the amount that you can do. Is just the
them?
amount of work that I expect myself to do. These are the outcomes that I believe that I can produce. And then for me, invincibility comes in because I think I can do everything. I believe that I can get it all done all of the time and I don't have to slow down, which is really what has led me to the work that I've done, that also like greatly revolves around self-care. And so, as especially if you are an entrepreneur, or if you are working a full-time gig like I am doing, that has pressure, or even if it doesn't have the pressure or like the time commitments, and then you're trying to do more, how do you do this in a way that makes sense for you, for your wellness, for those around you? Because let's go back to self-care. If you are not taking care of yourself, you are not, I don't care what you say, I don't care what you believe, if you are not taking care of yourself, if you are not making yourself a priority, you are not providing and producing the best that you actually could be. And so
Mhm.
I believe that even though I think that I'm invincible and I can do all of the things all of the time, we sometimes I have to be a little bit more flexible with myself. And so one of my favorite sayings is ease and grace, because I don't have to be perfect all the time. In fact, people actually enjoy it when you don't show up perfect. You show up as a person instead of like the polished, perfect person that you believe you should be showing up as. They want to see who you really are. They want to know that you made mistakes. Like, it's a thing. We're all going to do it. And so you don't have to be superwoman. You don't have to keep that cape on all of the time. And
Mhm.
so for me, it's a struggle. Like, if, we talked about the summit that I put on, and in terms of this fall, and I was doing that it's a business growth strategy, and and it was about self-care, something that I really love and care about. And so I thought it was a good idea to do that in the end of September. I was also doing that because I was launching my book at the end of September. Well, we're at the end of October and I still haven't launched this damn book because it turns out I'm not invincible. And also, I added this to the beginning of the college start, which was really dumb. Like, I know better than that timing. I don't have a lot of time in those first month and a half, because all of the things are happening, and then you add this climate that we're in, and there's no extra time. And so it's okay. The only person that set that deadline for myself was me. And so if I want to push that back to November, then that's what I get to do. And that's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. We get to do that, and we get to be okay with that, instead of creating this high level of expectation and, again, invincibility, because I've decided that I can do these things all of the time. And I am my own worst enemy, and I will preach it to you all day long. And then I'm still going to turn around and set a deadline that's going to have me up at 5 in the morning and up until 11 at night, because I think that I should be able to do those things for myself.
Mm. So I'm thinking of those listening, and obviously it sounds like we can both relate to the fact that we don't have this down yet, and it's still a work in progress, but we're further than we were at maybe a previous point in time. So if
Hmm.
somebody is listening and they're really in the throes of this,
Hmm.
where they find themselves really overextending themselves, setting those unrealistic deadlines, taking on more than is reasonable, but it's a part of their identity.
Hmm.
There are some early experiences and narratives that they have developed that reinforce that.
Hmm.
There's that internal dialogue that's working against them. Then
Yep.
it's gotten reinforced through different experiences in life. What would you say are some of those first steps that you can take to get to the point where it seems like you are, the majority of the time, giving yourself some grace, some
Hmm.
ease,
Hmm.
not being so critical? And if you need to extend a deadline, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
We can say that, we understand it logically, but that doesn't mean
Mm,
internally that
different
works for
here. And I'm even before I answer your question, I'm going to add one more thing, because there's this fear of failure. Like, and it's,
us.
as an entrepreneur, especially when you put yourself out there and you say, this is what I do. Like, it's a hard thing first to say, this is what I'm doing. And then you create this fear of failure because you don't want to fall on your face. But guess what? You are going to fall on your face. And that's where I'm coming back to. Like, you're going to find things that worked. You're going to have to do and evaluate, and then do, and then reevaluate, and then do and then reevaluate. That is what it's all about. And so you do have to find that balance, and you have to take those couple of steps to take care of yourself. um, there is a, because the book that I'm writing is all about self-care, and so there is a quote that I live and die by, especially when I'm working with my clients. And that is, a blogger named Katie Reed wrote this during the pandemic, and it is, self-care is not giving the world self-care is giving the world the best of you, not the rest of you. And so it's just about understanding that you don't, yeah, I love that so much. I wish I said it. I give her so much props for that, because it just is, it explains it. Because how do you define self-care in terms of, like, oh, it's meditation, oh, it's going for a walk, oh, it's physical fitness, oh, it's eating? No, it's all of these things, and probably a couple more. I have my own definition of self-care, and it includes like 6 different categories. But you have to figure out, how do you implement those categories? And so you're going to start with the foundation. It is always about, nobody wants to hear this, it is always about sleep is number one priority, and then your nutrition and your movement. And I'm not talking about being a CrossFitter and eating like macro diets. If you want to do that and that makes you happy, awesome, do that. but that's not what it has to be. It just has to be about like, you're not living off of energy bars and on energy drinks and everything processed, and you're giving yourself some movement. Doesn't mean you're running marathons. I've tried that. That wasn't the thing that fulfilled me either. But I do love to walk on a regular basis. I do love to move my body in terms of like yoga and qigong and those sorts of things. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
find what resonates with you, and you have to give yourself the time to do it. And if you are not sleeping, ain't nothing happening good. You are not reacting the way that you should be. You are not producing the way that you want to be. You are not nearly as effective as you think that you are if you are not taking care of those core foundational things. And you can start with, it can be super basic, like, and it again is not about perfection and creating this very strict and sort of like tried and true diet nutrition plan. It's not about creating this exercise plan that's not achievable. It's not about creating these sleep expectations that are also not achievable, because everybody has their own cycle of life. And so it is always just about setting yourself up for the best, creating what is ideal, and then striving towards that, never believing that it's going to be perfect. You're just going to do the best that you can. Set some boundaries, create some like,
Mm-hmm.
here is the best that I can do today, and know that I'll try to do better tomorrow if it wasn't fantastic, and celebrating where it was fantastic, because we don't do that either. So that's my first sort of like, how do we start this process, is we start by just pouring into ourselves a little bit. Like, there's so many cliche settings sayings around self-care, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. I'm sorry that that is a cliche that I'm pulling out of my hat at the moment, but it is the truth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So if you want to show up for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, for your career, your community, whatever it is that's important to you, you've got to stop and you've got to take care of yourself, whether that is 15 minutes a day to start, and then, trying to get good sleep, trying to eat, trying to move a little bit. And then you can build upon that until you find the thing that's comfortable for you and the thing that's working for you. And also, that thing changes based on the season of life that you are in. So if you're married or not married and you've got little kids, whatever this is, whatever those seasons are that you are in, they will change. And as soon as you think you've got it figured out, you're going to get a curveball and something else is going to change, or somebody's going to leave the nest, or whatever that looks like. And you have to then figure out what it is that you need to be doing at that time.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're recommending really going back to the basics. I'm thinking of those
Mhm.
people that are already so overloaded where they're listening to you say this, and it's like that makes so much sense.
It does, but I
But
don't have time.
I have all of this responsibility,
Mhm.
these people that look at me, there's this level of need.
Mhm.
Who's going to do these things if I don't do them?
Yep.
I think a lot of times it can be really hard to
Mhm.
fit in that time. But what you're saying is you can start small, you can
Mhm.
gradually build. It's almost like you put it in your calendar like an appointment and you're making that
Absolutely.
commitment to you
That is
towards the biggest.
absolutely. Yes. And then I'm going to say the other side of this too. So depending on what those responsibilities are, if you this is the biggest struggle that I see, especially with people that have children, include them in the process. So help them, have them help you make the healthier choices, have them, participate in the exercise programs, have them talk about how important sleep is. If you share that with them, they get to share that with the people that they care about and they love, and they will. I remember one of my kids, oh sorry, there's a dog barking downstairs. One of my kids, when he was younger in elementary school, we realized that he is dyslexic and had ADHD, and it was a struggle. How are we going to navigate this in a way, because also this was 20 years ago, and so how do we navigate this in a way that's going to be helpful for him? Do we want to medicate him? Do we not want to medicate him? What are the things that are going to be really successful for him? And so we found the things, and we ultimately, in his case, we didn't end up medicating him. It wasn't the right thing for him at that moment, but we were open if that was what we needed to do. But what we found is, if we could set some boundaries for him in terms of sleep, that's going to change his life. And he is a night owl to this day, and so that was a struggle. We fought tooth and nail about that. But then I introduced meditation to him. And that was when I learned meditation, was because I thought it was going to be helpful for him. And so I introduced meditation to him. He still asks me for guided meditations to this day. Like, I'm working on this thing. Can you make me a thing? I can make you a thing. Let's do that. We did a lot around nutrition and processed foods for him, because that was really that turned out to be really key, and he still has a really good understanding of how they impact him. And so if you
Mhm.
can, my whole point to that was, if you can figure out how to bring those seasons, those things, those challenges into the process, it's going to
Yeah.
work a lot better for you. If you've got coworkers that are struggling with something, and that can create accountability for you to maybe stick to walking up the steps or going for a walk, or, doing something, then even better. Then somebody else is benefiting from that as well. So you can make all of the excuses. And there are gazillion excuses. You have to figure out what are your priorities, and then how do you make it work for you.
Mhm.
Sounds really easy.
So what is more of the intermediate level? I mean, it sounds like even the example with your son was
Hmm.
kind of leading me into that, where you always start with the basics, but then
Hmm.
once you have the basics down better than before, you
Hmm.
can start broadening the horizon and looking into maybe some of those additional things, like
Hmm.
whatever it may be, trial
Yeah.
and error,
Yeah.
figuring out what works, meditation being one, what type of physical movement, and then it can kind of run the gamut from there.
Hmm.
But what would you say are some of those moderate level
Hmm.
things? So once you've got the basics down and making
Yes.
sure that you're those
Yeah.
boxes.
I love that. I love that we're digging into
Mhm.
this. So I've got this model of self-care that I think the foundation sits at the middle, and then out around that are some other things. And so that has to do with things like creativity. If
Mhm.
Creativity is great. Like, if you want to paint, if you want to bake, if you like, figure out what it is. And a lot of times this goes back to, what did you enjoy when you were a kid? Look at that again. Did you love riding horses? Did you love singing music? Did you love playing music? Did you love writing? Did you, figure out what used to light you up? Because chances are there's something that you can use there to move forward, or explore other
Mhm.
things. I, one of my favorite things to do is paint, but I'm going to tell you that nobody's ever going to pay for anything that I am painting. Most people don't even recognize what it is. And my husband and everybody in my family is very artistic except for me. And so he and I will have date nights where we just sit at the table and paint. And my teenage son will walk in and he'll look at my dad's and be like, ooh, or look at his dad's and be like, that's so cool. I love that you're doing this, and I love that you're doing that. And then he'll look at mine and just laugh out loud. It's just a thing that, I'm not really sure what that is, Mom, or what you were going for there, but good job. But like, I'm never going to display it. I'm never putting it out, but it makes me feel good in the moment. Like, I enjoy putting the colors together. I enjoy what's happening on the paper. I enjoy the process of it. I don't ever, for myself, enjoy that end goal of like, ooh, how about that? That's not great. But I enjoyed the process, and I enjoyed the creativity and the flow that came out of that. And then it comes back to that sort of flow. So I think, that's just one example. Find the things that light you up. I think that social well-being is also something we really need to talk
Mhm.
about, and something that a lot of us are not doing really well right now. We are not cultivating beneficial and helpful relationships. We are worrying about our
Mhm.
responsibilities all of the time, and not necessarily getting what we need out of those relationships, and setting boundaries. As we're sitting here, my phone is blowing up because my mom thinks I should be somewhere else. And so I'm not going to be there. That's just the way it goes. It's fine. I have to have these boundaries. I have expectations. Again, with the expectations, I'm not sure what that word is tonight, but I've set my own expectations versus hers, because that was a thing that I had to work through quite a while ago. And so it's okay to set those boundaries. And when you
Yeah.
do, people are not going to appreciate that you have set those boundaries, but that's okay as well. They'll come around to it, and they'll start to respect it when you stick to it. You can't give in. You can't say I'm setting it and then give in, because then you've just blown it and it's harder to set the next time. But when you set it and you stick to it and you explain why, don't come at it aggressively with a hard no, but here's my why. This is what I need for me, and make it about my emotion and my positivity and what I need from the situation. Usually that will land with people much better. And if it doesn't, then you probably need to reevaluate that relationship anyway,
Yeah.
which is not an easy thing to do either. So those are
Oh, those
two
are
of them.
great tips. That's wonderful. Yeah. So I'll make sure to list those as like key takeaways for people for the episode,
Fantastic.
because I think that a lot of this, there are things that I may have heard, but I feel like they're resonating at this point in time and
Hmm.
this stage in life
Hmm.
in a different way. I think
Hmm.
that's also the beauty of having a platform like this, where those listening might be hearing some of these things
Yeah.
similarly, right?
Hmm.
Either for the first time, some of them, or it's been something that they've heard repeatedly, but
Mhm.
maybe they're now in a place where they can start
Yeah.
small and
Or it just
implement.
means
Maybe
something
they're
different. Like if I'm 20 years ago, what you said to me meant something different than what it does today. And so that's, I think you're exactly right. That's the cool thing about like just understanding where people are coming from and what they need and how do you get there and just opening yourself to the perspectives of other people and what's working for them versus just saying a hard no and that's not going to work for me. I've tried that. I run across a lot of people that are like, nope, I can't do that. But why? Let's dig a little
Mhm.
deeper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is all making me wonder how this ties into the summit and ultimately the
Mm.
podcast.
Mhm.
So with this kind of self-care journey and you helping other people in their process, what
Mhm.
was the motivation behind these summits for you?
So fascinating, right? The summit for me is all about this is business development. It's just a strategy and growing my audience. And so by reaching out when you host a summit, you're not the speaker, you're the interviewer, which I have discovered I love doing. I didn't recognize that about myself. I was super nervous. I've done two now. You were in the first one in January. And then I thought this was going to be something I did quarterly because back to the invincibility thing. They're a lot harder to
Mhm.
pull off than you would anticipate. And even like I have a background as event planning. And so I thought this is no problem. I can do this like no problem whatsoever. Yeah, it's a lot more work than I was anticipating. And so we're not going to ever do quarterly, but maybe one or two a year because it does a couple of things for me. In like
Mhm.
in January, my whole point in doing it was the ROI and creating audience. I went in it with a mindset that like I don't think it was where I needed to be, right? It didn't feel positive. It was all about just growth and I need to gain these followers and I need to do these things. And here's the outcome that I'm looking for. And sort of like being very controlling and perfectionistic in what those outcomes are. What I got out of the one in January was connection. There were you, and there were specifically two other people that I was like, these are people that I need to stay connected to, who I really enjoyed the conversation with, and fascinatingly enough, so I had set an expectation on what I don't know what is my thing with this word tonight. I I am going to have to do some reflection on that one later. But I had said like you have to have a minimum following in order to participate in the summit, and the couple of people that had met that requirement are the people that did not share the summit in their facilitation or their participation in the summit. It's the people that did not have the following that were putting it out there and sharing. And I learned I learned a lot of lessons in doing that summit, but one of them was I didn't track where people came from, and so I'm pretty certain that they came from the people with the smaller audiences. And so this time around, I did it again here in the beginning of September. And I'll give you the link because it's completely free. I've not closed it. It's open to everybody. I have 12 speakers on there. And the whole concept behind it is Empower Her Self-Care Summit. It's mostly geared
Mhm.
for women. Men can listen to it and they can get some nuggets out of it. But it's mostly about women and the cycles of life that we're in and how do we take care of ourselves so that we can be better, feel better, be better, do better is the sort of little saying that came out of that for me. And so what I learned is that I don't need to have a couple of people with a huge audience. What I need is people that are invested and are willing to invest themselves in it. And so I ended up with 12 speakers. I did not mean to do that. I meant to do this small micro summit, audio only, with 5 or 6 speakers all around the
Mhm.
topics of the parts of my book that I'm coming out with, because that was the whole goal, was to gain an audience for the parts or for the book itself. And so I put it out there and I put it out in a couple of different Facebook groups, and I ended up with a little over 50 people applying to be a part of it. And so what I learned is that I needed a web page to set it up and I needed to ask for a commitment. And this is my expectation of you. And I really did call that an expectation. So it's okay that I'm using that word again. And then you are committing to doing those things. And so it was a little bit of social media. It was 2 emails. Not only that, but you had to tag me and copy me in those things so that I knew that you were doing it, because I hate to be a jerk, but if you're not doing it, it's not worth my time for you to have done it.
Sure.
And then when I did the registration page, I collected, how did you find out about this summit? And so in my follow up, I was able to share with people, these are all of the people of your audience that engaged. And so now you can go back to those people and re-engage with those people. And then the one or two people that did not do their share of the work, I got to say, except that nobody from your audience participated. So maybe you should go back and share that and sort of call them out on it in a very nice way. And so, because I think that, if
Live and learn.
live and learn, right? And also call people out. Like, communication is where it's at. And I didn't come at this with like, how dare you not share this? It was just I need you to know that this didn't really work out the way I thought it was. This is a give and take. You're getting
You were very clear about the
right.
expectations in the beginning, and
Right.
then you also reminded, and then
Yep.
there was the follow through and
Right.
follow
I
up.
provided them with social media posts. I provided them with the language. Use it or not. You don't have to use it. You can use your own language, your own tone. But here's the starting point for you, and here's the plug and play if you want it. So
Yeah.
that way we all have the same things going in, and so that I can very just easily say, except there was an expectation of you and you didn't follow through. And so that says a lot to me, because this is a give and take. We are out to do this together. There should be an ROI for both of us. If I'm willing to give you my platform and then you are willing to take my time to do that, then there needs to be an ROI that we both get a little something out of this. And I continue to follow up with the people that did participate and engage the way that I thought that they should. And they are seeing some engagement from the larger platform, not just from their own audience, but they've made some sales. And so that's all we were looking
That's
for.
exciting.
And I will tell you, the other side of this is, for me, as I navigate what's happening in my business and what it is I actually do and how I want to serve, because I know I've got this really fierce calling to serve. I'm just not exactly sure where it comes from all of the time and what that end goal is. And as an entrepreneur, it's so hard when you're trying to set up the business model and the strategy and the plan, and you throw these things out there and it doesn't work. But did you leave it out there long enough? And did you put it in the right places, and did you get in front of the right people? And so you don't actually know what's working and what's not. And so for me, it came down to, rather than the one in January of having this expectation and goals associated with it, I just want to help. I want people to have this thing. I want them to have these tools and these resources. And so it ended up that the women that came on to this podcast were really fantastic, just like the ones that we had in January. But they were great, and they shared these resources, and everybody had a free giveaway. And we had 160 people sign up for that summit. I was hoping for like 50. And so I not only was I blown away because I didn't set a goal and still exceeded anything I could have dreamed of. What I'm getting from that is like this, and I talked about this on my podcast not long ago, and I think I was only at 100 at that point, but I have this like dual emotions that are battling. Like, I'm so excited and I so love this because it proves to me that this is what people need and this is what they're looking for. And then this other side of it makes me so sad that this is what people need and this is what they're looking for, because we're not feeling okay right now. And we feel like we're not in a good place. And how do we get into a good place? And how do we calm the anxiety? And how do we regulate our emotions? And how do we get people to serve us in the way that we want them to be serving us while we're serving everybody all the time? So it's sort of that dual emotion. But again, the reason behind the summit is just trying to create some ROI there.
Well, hats off to you. I appreciate sharing a little bit of the background. Couldn't be happier that it was as successful as it was. And I really appreciate what you shared about what you did differently this time to
Mm.
really get the more widespread involvement, engagement that you were looking for. So I would assume that the podcast came out of the experience that you had interviewing and realizing how much you enjoyed that. Was that a piece for you?
No, actually, it turns out I had started the podcast before I started, like right before I started interviewing for the summit. Because also, Miss Invincibility, it's a good idea to try to launch a podcast and pull off a summit and write the book all at the same time while working a full-time job. No worries. The podcast is something like when I first started this journey of what is it that I'm supposed to be doing, and we're talking 2 or 3 years ago, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be doing it? Again, I do the hippie woo thing. And so I just started asking myself some questions and reflecting on what is it I'm supposed to be doing. And I absorb ebooks and podcasts like nobody's business. That's what I'm listening to as I'm getting ready for work in the morning. I have a 20-minute commute. So that's happening on my commute. If I have downtime in the office, that's what I'm doing. If we're driving somewhere and it's more than an hour, I'm so excited because I'm going to get a lot of information at that moment. And my husband's like, oh gosh, another one. What are we listening to today? Yeah, I can't wait. And I'm like planning it ahead of time, which ones I'm going to be listening to. So it just is something that I've always loved and loved listening to. And so I just felt like, is this something that I should be doing? And I do these breathwork journeys and meditations, and I'll often ask myself a question before, and it's not even, I'm not asking myself, I'm asking somebody the question, like, is this something I should be doing? And a podcast came up for me before I even understood what the business was. And I knew that it was something I needed to be doing. And then I put it off and I put it off and I put it off. I also will remind you, I have an associate degree in technology, computer science, and the technology is the piece behind the podcast that stopped me from moving forward. I was allowing it to intimidate me. I am not easily, I'm not a person that gets intimidated very easily. And so I just allowed that to happen. And I think that comes back to that like fear of failure, fear of putting myself out there, being afraid that I'm going to put this out there and people that I know are going to laugh at me, or they're not going to appreciate what I'm doing, or it's just not going to be successful. And I'm going to put all this time and effort back into this thing and it's not going to pay off. That's not actually what's happening. It's actually being really well received. And my numbers are, while I'm not like a blockbuster, because it takes a long time to build into that. But I'm really happy with the output that's happening, with the numbers that I'm accumulating, with the analysis that comes behind that. But even more so, I want at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, I will do a collaboration along the lines of this. So I'll get to interview you for this podcast. That collaboration comes back to what I was talking about with self-care. Like, this might be business and that might be what we're talking about, but man, that connection feels so good. And just to get to experience other people and to learn about other people, because I always lead by learning about other people. When you come in my office, when I'm at work and you come in my office and you're in trouble, I'm not starting with why you're in trouble. I'm leading with, tell me a little bit about yourself so that I understand what motivates you, so that I can understand how we move forward in this conversation. And so that's the other thing that I'm getting out of this podcast, is the connection. And then that sort of, you would think that would be something that would be draining. Like, oh gosh, I have to interview this person again. I have to get online. I have to do these things. But I walk away from them like super hyped up, like, oh, I have so much energy right now because I just did this really amazing thing and I just had this great conversation and I love what they're doing. So that's where my again, another super long answer to how I got to the podcast. Like, I just feel like it was a calling. It was something that was really important for me to be doing and putting myself out there, so that is a way that I'm serving the people that I think need to be helped.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to be on the show and share it.
Me too.
Please tell people how they can find you, if they're interested in working with you, and if they want to be involved in this summit, if they want to listen to these incredible speakers and hear more about what you have going on.
Absolutely. So you can always find me at my website. It is www.drtanyab.com, and Tanya is with an A. So Tanya. And then you can find my podcast. It is Dr. Tanya B. And I will give Julia the link for the website, for the podcast, and then for the summit itself. So the Empower Her Self-Care Summit is there. And then the other thing that I love to give away is meditation is my jam when it comes to self-care. It's something that I absolutely love to do. And so you can go to the website and get I'm having a hard time spitting this one out. You can go to the website and get a free chakra alignment meditation, because again, I love the hippie woo. And so I practice Reiki, and chakras are something that I sort of delve into. And so there is a chakra alignment meditation that you can pick up. And so I will give you the link to that as well.
Well, it has been so nice to reconnect with you, learn more about your journey and the work that you're doing. And I am definitely going to continue to follow along for all these incredible things that you have coming up. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.